The screaming fog of Route 66. You know, people think this job is just about driving, getting from point A to point B. And most of the time, it is. It's long hours, bad coffee, and the constant hum of the road. But after 50 plus years out here, you learn that the road, she's got a personality. She's got her own moods. Sometimes she's calm and peaceful, just a ribbon of blacktop under the stars. Other times, she's hungry. And I've seen things on those hungry nights. Things that don't make sense. Things that'll make your blood run cold. This one still makes the hair on my arms stand up. It was a run I was doing a long time ago, late 70s maybe. I was hauling a load of electronics from Phoenix up to Flagstaff. This was before the big interstate was all finished, so you still had to take a lot of the old routes. I was on a desolate stretch of Route 66, way out there in the middle of nowhere. Just me, my rig, and the empty desert sky. It was about 2 in the morning. The kind of dark where the stars shine so bright they almost hurt your eyes. I'd been on the road for about 16 hours, and I was feeling it. My eyelids were heavy. I had a thermos of coffee, but it was just warm brown water at that point. I was pushing it, I knew that. But I had a deadline, and back then, a deadline meant everything. I remember thinking about pulling over for a quick nap, finding a rest stop. But just as the thought crossed my mind, I saw it up ahead. It looked like a storm, but it wasn't. There were no clouds in the sky, no lightning, no thunder. It was just fog. A thick, white wall of fog rolling in from the north. But this wasn't ordinary fog. It didn't drift. It didn't swirl. It just pulsed. It moved with a strange, unnatural purpose, like a living thing. It was fast, too. In the time it took me to blink, it had swallowed a half-mile of road ahead of me. My gut told me to stop, to pull over and wait it out. But my brain, that stubborn thing, said, "Nah, it's just a little fog. You've driven through worse." So I eased my foot off the pedal, slowed down to about 20 miles an hour, and drove right into it. The moment the front of my truck hit that wall of white, everything went dead. The outside world just disappeared. It wasn't just a visual thing. The sound changed. The constant rumble of the engine against the pavement, the whine of the tires on the asphalt, it was all muted. It felt like I was driving through thick cotton. My radio, which had been playing some country tune, just died. Nothing but static. The lights on my dash seemed to dim, like they were fighting to stay on. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't even see the hood of my truck. The road was gone. The yellow line was gone. It was like I was in a snow globe, a world of nothing but thick, suffocating white. And then I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind. A high-pitched, wailing sound. But there was no wind. Not a single breath of it. The sound wasn't a whistle. It was a scream. Not a full-throated, panic scream, but more like a dozen whispers, all screaming at once. Distant, faint, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere. I told myself it was just my imagination. A combination of fatigue and the eerie quiet. "It's just the fog," I said out loud. But my voice sounded weak, swallowed by the silence. The screams got closer. They weren't whispers anymore. They were clear, human wails. Dozens of them. Cries of pain and terror. They were all around me, coming from the sides of the road, from directly in front of the truck. And they weren't just screams. There was a sound of something else, a wet, fleshy sound, like something was being ripped apart. A snapping, cracking noise. I hit the gas, my foot shaking on the pedal. I had to get out of there. I was doing maybe 30 miles an hour, and it felt like 100 in that white oblivion. The steering wheel was jumping in my hands. The screams were so loud now, they were deafening. I could hear individual voices crying out, begging for help. They sounded like they were right outside my window. That's when I saw it. Or felt it. A dark shape, just for a second, pressed against the passenger side window. It was distorted by the thick fog, but it was there. It was tall, too tall to be a person. It didn't have distinct features, just a dark, blurred outline. But I could make out something. An arm, maybe? It was reaching for the door handle. I screamed. Just a raw, guttural yell. I swerved the truck to the left, then to the right, just trying to break away from whatever it was. The thing wasn't running. It was floating, gliding along with my truck. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I put the pedal to the floor, my old rig protesting with a roar. The engine noise came back, but it was fighting against the screams. The dashboard lights flickered wildly. The shape was gone, but the screams were still there, and now I could hear new sounds. A scraping noise like a metal hook being dragged along the side of my trailer. And a high-pitched, terrible scratching on my windshield. I didn't dare look. I just stared straight ahead into the blinding white. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, praying it would be gone when I opened them. But it wasn't. The scratching was still there, the screams still rang in my ears. I just drove. I drove for what felt like an eternity, but must have only been a few minutes. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The white wall of fog vanished. It was like I'd driven through a portal. 1 second, I was in a suffocating world of white and screaming, and the next, I was back on the empty blacktop under the stars. The radio hummed back to life, static giving way to a song. The dashboard lights were bright again. The silence of the desert night was back, broken only by the hum of my truck. I pulled over immediately. My whole body was shaking. I got out, my legs wobbly, and I looked back. Nothing. Not a single wisp of fog. The road was clear for miles. My trailer was unscratched. The paint was perfect. There were no marks on the windshield. There was no sign of what I had just experienced, except for the feeling in my gut. A cold, heavy knot that told me it was real. I sat there on the side of the road for an hour, just catching my breath. I never took that route at night again. And to this day, when I see a fog bank rolling in, no matter how normal it looks, I pull over. I turn off my engine. And I wait. Because I know that some things just aren't natural. And that screaming fog wasn't just a weather phenomenon. It was a trap. The girl in the mirror on Highway 50. This one takes me back to the loneliest road in America. Highway 50 in Nevada. The road's so straight and long out there that you can see a truck's headlights on the horizon for 20 miles before it even passes you. It's just you and the asphalt. And sometimes, something else. This was a long time ago, a few years after the fog incident. I was hauling a load from Reno to Utah. It was a beautiful night, clear as a bell, a million stars in the sky. It was so quiet out there you could practically hear the hum of the universe. It was the kind of night that can mess with a man's head if he's out there too long. I'd been driving since early evening, and around 1 in the morning, I started to feel that familiar ache in my shoulders. My eyes were starting to get a little heavy. I saw a small rest stop up ahead, just a pull-off with a picnic table and an outhouse. No lights, just a sign. I figured it was a good place to stretch my legs and splash some cold water on my face. I pulled off the highway and shut down the engine. The silence was immediate and absolute. It was so quiet, the ringing in my ears felt loud. The place was empty too. No other trucks, no cars, nothing. Just my rig and the big, empty dark. The moon was a sliver of white, but the stars gave off enough light to see. I got out and walked around the front of my truck, stretching my back, cracking the vertebrae. As I was walking back, I saw it. A car. A beat-up old Ford sedan, parked right by the picnic table. I must have been so focused on the road that I didn't see it when I pulled in. It was black and rusted, just sitting there in the moonlight. No one was in it. No headlights on. Just a dead car. I didn't think much of it. Maybe someone broke down and went to find help. I went over to the outhouse, did what I had to do, and headed back to my truck. That's when I saw something in the side mirror of that old Ford. It was a reflection of me, sure, but there was something else in the background. A shape. It looked like a girl. I squinted. The reflection was distorted, but I could make out a pale face and long dark hair. She was just standing there, behind my truck, watching me. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty desert. The reflection was gone too. I shook my head, figuring it was just a trick of the light, an illusion. The mind plays tricks on you out here. I got back in my truck, started the engine, and started to pull out. As I was easing back onto the highway, I glanced at my own passenger side mirror to check for traffic. And that's when I saw her. She was standing in the mirror. Not behind me, not on the road. In the mirror. She was right there in the small, reflective glass, looking at me. It was the same girl I thought I'd seen in the car's mirror. Pale skin, dark hair covering her face, and eyes. Her eyes were hollow, empty black holes. But they were fixed on me. I slammed on the brakes, and my rig shuddered to a stop. I stared at the mirror. She was still there. She wasn't a reflection of anything. The reflection of my truck's trailer was there. A blurred image of the road behind me was there. But she was a separate entity, a full-bodied figure, standing in the space of the mirror. It was like the glass was a window to another place, and she was on the other side. I felt a jolt of cold fear, the kind that goes straight to your bones. I rubbed my eyes hard, convinced I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. But when I opened them, she was still there. And she was moving. Slowly, without a sound, she began to walk. Not on the road. In the mirror. Her reflection moved closer to the glass, her face inching toward the edge of the frame. Her head tilted, and a faint smile appeared on her lips, a terrible, cruel curve that didn't match her vacant eyes. She was just walking on nothing, inside the little mirror on the side of my cab. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was impossible. But the impossible was right there. I put the truck in gear and started to drive again, my heart pounding in my chest. I thought that maybe if I drove fast enough, the image would get blurry, or she'd disappear. But she didn't. She stayed right there, a clear figure in the mirror. She raised her hand. Her fingers looked long and skeletal. She brought her hand up and placed it against the inside of the mirror, her fingers splayed out on the glass. I could feel a cold spot on the cab where her hand would have been, a chill that seeped through the metal and plastic. Then she started to tap. Not on the mirror itself, but on the inside of the reflection. Tap. 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 The sound was faint, a ghostly rhythm, but it was there, and it was getting louder. Her face was pressed right up against the glass now, distorted, her mouth a wide, dark hole. The taps turned into a frantic scraping sound, like she was trying to get through. I could see her teeth, sharp and pointed, in the moonlight. I swerved the truck to the left, then to the right, just a little, trying to hit a bump that might jar the mirror, anything to break the spell. But she just held on, her face a mask of fury, her hands clawing at the glass. The tapping was a desperate, frenzied scratching now. Her eyes, those empty black pits, were staring straight into mine. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear was a living thing in my chest. I grabbed my flashlight from the seat and with my right hand I swung it as hard as I could at the passenger side mirror. The glass shattered with a horrible, sharp crash. 1,000 pieces of glass went flying, reflecting the moonlight for a second. I pulled over, my hand bleeding from where a shard of glass cut me. My chest was heaving. I looked at the mirror. It was gone. Just the broken stump of the bracket remained. I looked behind me, through the back window, and in the driver's side mirror. She was gone. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm down. I was shaken to my core. I never went back to that rest stop. I never drove that stretch of Highway 50 again without remembering her face, her eyes, and the sound of her nails scraping on that mirror. It taught me a valuable lesson. On those long, lonely roads, you might think you're alone with your thoughts, but sometimes, you're not. Sometimes, there's something else out there, looking for a way in. The Hitchhiker Who Just Appeared. This next one is a story about the rules of the road. You spend enough time out here, you learn the unwritten rules. Don't mess with the trucker's coffee. Don't park too close to the fuel pump. And most importantly, you never, ever pick up a hitchhiker. Not in the middle of nowhere, and especially not late at night. There are 100 reasons for that rule, but I found out there's one that no one ever talks about. This was a run I was making a few years back, up through the mountains of Idaho. It was a beautiful night, but the kind of dark where you can't see your hand in front of your face once you get away from the headlights. The kind of road that twists and turns, and just when you think you've seen the worst of it, there's another hairpin curve. I hadn't seen another vehicle, or a light, for over an hour. It was just me and the truck, and the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I was thinking about home, about my wife. Just trying to pass the time. My eyes were focused on the road ahead, a narrow cone of light cutting through the absolute black. I remember feeling tired, but not tired enough to pull over. Just that low-level exhaustion that sets in after a full day's drive. I looked in my passenger side mirror, and in the span of a single blink, I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder of the road, just a few feet from my rig. He was tall and thin, wearing a long, dark coat and holding a duffel bag. He wasn't waving his thumb out. He wasn't making eye contact. He was just standing there, facing away from me, looking down at his feet like he was waiting for the ground to open up. I knew deep in my gut that he hadn't been there a second before. I'd been watching the road. It was clear. No lights, no cars pulled over. Nothing. It felt like he just materialized. My first thought was to slow down, but the truck driver's code kicked in. No hitchhikers. No matter what. So I kept my foot on the gas and just drove past him. I watched in my mirror as he got smaller and smaller, that tall, gaunt figure on the side of the road. I felt a pang of guilt, maybe, but mostly relief. It was a strange situation, and I was glad to be past it. I must have driven for a minute, maybe two. I was starting to relax. My breathing was evening out. I glanced at my dashboard, checking my speed. Then I happened to glance over at my passenger seat. And he was sitting there. Just sitting there. The same long coat, the same duffel bag resting on his knees. He hadn't made a sound. The door hadn't opened. The interior light hadn't turned on. He was just there, in my truck. My heart stopped. It felt like an ice pick was shoved into the center of my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My first instinct was to scream, but no sound would come out. It was like my throat had seized up. I tried to look at him, but my head wouldn't turn all the way. All I could see from the corner of my eye was that dark coat and the still figure. He didn't move. He didn't look at me. He just sat there, staring straight ahead through the windshield, as if he'd been riding with me the whole time. The only difference was that his skin, what little I could see of his face in the dark, was as pale as a corpse's. And his eyes, which I could just barely see as he turned his head slowly, were just two black, empty pits. No reflection, no light. Just pure darkness. My foot was frozen on the gas pedal. My entire body was paralyzed with a fear I'd never felt before. The silence in the cab was deafening. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I just kept driving, staring at the road, praying that this was all a terrible, terrible dream. Then he started to turn his head. He was looking at me now, and that's when I finally saw his face. It was gaunt, with sharp cheekbones and a sunken mouth. His lips were parted just slightly, as if to speak. He didn't say a word, though. Just a long, silent gasp, like he was trying to breathe but there was no air. It was the sound of something drowning, but without any water. The sound of a final breath. That's when the terror finally broke through the paralysis. My foot slammed on the brake pedal so hard the rig skidded to a stop on the slick asphalt. I was yelling, a long, guttural cry that ripped through my throat. I threw the door open and scrambled out of the truck, falling onto the pavement. I was shaking from head to toe. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I ran back around to the passenger side, my flashlight in my hand. The door was closed. I pulled on the handle. It was locked. I peered inside the window, pointing the beam of the flashlight around the cab. The seat was empty. No man. No long coat. No duffel bag. Nothing. I stood there, gasping for air, clutching the side of my truck. I unlocked the door and checked the seat again, running my hand over it. It was cold. Colder than the air outside. That's the only thing that was different. I've been driving for 50 years. I've picked up stranded travelers, given them a ride to the next town. But after that night, I never even considered it. That thing wasn't a person looking for a ride. It wasn't human. And I learned that some hitchhikers don't need a ride. They'll just appear right next to you, sitting there, waiting for you to notice them. And you always notice. The empty truck with the banging door. This happened out in the high desert of New Mexico, near one of those old, dusty ghost towns. The kind of place where you know something's happened, something bad, and the land just holds onto it. It was late, about 3 in the morning, and the wind was howling. That desert wind has a sound all its own, a dry, eerie whistle that sounds like it's telling you secrets. Out here, you see a lot of abandoned vehicles. Cars, trailers, sometimes even entire rigs. They just get left behind, rusted skeletons on the side of the road. You learn to ignore them. There's 1,000 reasons they were left there, and none of them are your business. But this one was different. I was rolling along, and up ahead, about half a mile, I saw it. An old semi-truck, a classic rig from the 60s, a real beast. It was pulled off to the side, rusted to hell, with a flat tire and no windows left. It looked like it had been there for decades. But as I got closer, I heard a sound over the engine noise and the wind. Bang. 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 I squinted. The sound was coming from the truck. Its driver's side door was swinging open and closed, over and over, slamming against the cab with a loud, metallic clang. I figured it was just the wind, nothing more. But the more I looked, the stranger it seemed. The wind was constant, but the banging was rhythmic. It had a strange, deliberate tempo to it. It wasn't just a random gust of wind. It felt purposeful. Curiosity got the better of me. That's a mistake out here. Always a mistake. I pulled my rig over, maybe 30 feet ahead of the old truck, and cut the engine. The silence was unnerving for a second, then the wind came back with a vengeance, and with it, that sound. Bang. Clang. Bang. I grabbed my flashlight and got out, walking toward the truck. The wind was cold and strong, but I knew, even then, that it wasn't enough to swing that heavy metal door with such force. As I got closer, I aimed my flashlight inside the cab. It was a disaster. The seats were torn to shreds, the dashboard was ripped apart, and there were deep scratch marks on the roof of the cab, like something with long claws had been trying to get out. The banging continued. I stood there, watching the door swing back and forth, and that's when I heard a new sound, a faint one coming from inside the cab. It was a slow, wet dragging sound. Like something heavy was moving across the floor, scraping against the metal. It was a sound that had nothing to do with the wind. My heart started to pound. I had a bad feeling, a really bad feeling. But my stupid, curious brain made me take one step closer. I reached out my hand to try and grab the door and hold it shut. I was just inches away. And in that instant, the wind died. The howling stopped completely. The door, instead of swinging back at me, swung forward with a final, terrible crash, and slammed shut. The sound was deafening, echoing across the empty desert. I jumped back, my hands still in the air. The door was now still. I tried the handle, but it was locked. I rattled it, but nothing happened. I could still hear that dragging sound from inside, now much clearer and closer. It was right on the other side of the door. I backed up and went around to the passenger side. I shone my flashlight through the broken window. The inside was pitch black, but as I got the beam in there, I saw it. Huddled on the floor, in the corner by the driver's seat, was a bulky, dark shape. It was shifting. It looked like a pile of rags, but it was moving like something was alive inside of it. I froze. I saw a hand, or what looked like one, with long, twisted fingers, slowly rise out of the mess and press against the inside of the windshield. It wasn't a person's hand. It was too long, too skeletal, too bent. And the windows, they began to fog up from the inside. I heard a gurgling, rattling noise like someone gargling with mud. The scraping sound started again, and I could hear it now, loud and clear, on the other side of that locked door. It was a terrible, scratching sound, like a finger dragging across metal. The thing inside was right there, on the other side of the cab door, waiting. I ran. I didn't look back. I just sprinted back to my truck, scrambled inside, and locked the doors. I started the engine and put it in gear, tearing off down the highway. The sound of that final, crashing door stayed in my head. I never saw a banging door like that again. And I learned that some things aren't just left on the side of the road. They're left to wait. That old rig wasn't empty. It had a ghost driver inside, and that door wasn't banging because of the wind. It was trying to get out. The thing that followed me from the woods. Alright. This is the last one. And it's the one that keeps me up at night, more than any of the others. The first ones were strange, ghostly, but this was real. It had weight. And it had teeth. This was a long haul up in the mountains of British Columbia. The roads up there are just a tiny strip of asphalt between two walls of thick, ancient woods. Pine trees so tall they block out the sky. It's beautiful, but it's also suffocating. You feel like you're driving through a tunnel of green, and you get the feeling that those woods aren't empty. They're watching you. The silence in those places isn't a lack of sound. It's a presence. It's a quiet that's listening. It was about midnight, and I was on a stretch of winding road that hadn't seen a street light in 50 miles. I was tired, and my body was aching. I saw a small, unmarked dirt road leading off the highway, and I figured it was a good place to pull over for a quick rest. I pulled my rig down at about 100 feet, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The cold air hit me, and with it, a strange smell. It wasn't a deer or a skunk. It was a terrible mix of things: wet earth, old decay, and something like burned metal. It was a smell that didn't belong in the woods. I looked around, and all I could see was the dense, black tree line, the beams of my headlights just barely cutting into the darkness. I felt a chill, and it wasn't from the cold. I heard something then. A twig snapped deep in the woods to my right. It was a loud crack, like something heavy had stepped on it. I told myself it was just a bear or a moose. I got back in my cab, my heart beating a little faster. As I started the engine, I glanced in my side mirror one last time. That's when I saw it. The headlights of my truck illuminated a patch of the woods, and something was moving. It was a huge shadow, standing on two legs, about 50 feet away. It was too tall to be a person, too thin to be a bear. It moved with a strange, lurching gait, like a broken machine. It was there for only a second before it vanished back into the tree line. I didn't wait. I threw the rig into gear and floored the pedal, the tires spitting gravel as I tore back onto the highway. My heart was pounding in my ears. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, but the feeling in my gut was pure dread. I was maybe a mile down the road when I looked in my side mirror again. And I saw it. It wasn't in the woods anymore. It was on the road. It had burst from the tree line and was running on all fours, a terrifying, unnatural gallop. Its body was long and low to the ground, with spindly, oversized limbs. It was moving faster than any animal I had ever seen. The sound of its footsteps was an impossible, fleshy thud against the asphalt, and I could hear a wet, gurgling roar as it chased me. I looked at my speedometer. I was doing 80 miles an hour, and this thing was gaining on me. I slammed on the gas, pushing my old rig to its absolute limit. I looked in my side mirror again, and it was right there, in the cone of my headlights. Its body was a sickly, pale white, almost translucent in the light. Its eyes were two black, vacant pits, and its mouth was a gaping maw filled with jagged, mismatched teeth. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a moose. It wasn't human. That thing wasn't human. It was something out of a nightmare, and it wanted something. I heard a terrible thump and the whole cab shuddered. It had jumped and landed on the back of my trailer. The rig swayed from side to side as I felt the weight of it. I could hear a horrible screeching sound, like its claws were digging into the metal, trying to get a grip. I started to swerve the truck wildly, hoping to throw it off. The rig was groaning, the load was shifting, and I could hear the thing scraping its way up the length of my trailer, its movements clumsy and fast. It was coming for the cab. I had to get it off. I saw a sharp turn coming up, and a series of deep potholes. I didn't slow down. The rig hit the potholes hard, rattling my teeth. I took the turn with a scream, and the trailer slid, a grinding, metallic screech filling the air. I looked in my mirror and saw the thing lose its footing and go flying off the side of the trailer. It hit the road with a sickening, wet crack and rolled into the ditch. I didn't stop. I kept my foot on the gas and didn't look back for 10 miles. I drove until I saw the first sign of civilization, the glow of city lights on the horizon. I didn't slow down until I was in a well-lit gas station, and even then, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely pull the rig into a spot. I got out and walked to the back of my trailer. My heart was still pounding. And there it was. Not a scratch on the paint, but deep, long gouges in the metal, 5 distinct claw marks, as if something with a long hand had tried to dig its way through steel. I never drove that stretch of road again. I never went near those woods. I learned that some things don't belong in our world. And those things don't always stay where they belong. The woods have their own monsters, and sometimes, those monsters get a taste for what's on the other side. That thing wasn't human. And I got the feeling that it wasn't the only one out there.